welcome. Take it up with Jessica Lee. I'm with Irshad Raihan, who is the Director of Product Marketing from Red Hat. Welcome. How
Thanks,
are you?
Jessica. Yeah, I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm fine, thank you. Let's hear about Red Hat. How's that going?
Red Hat's going great. We are fundamentally an enterprise software company that uses an open source development model. And it's a very interesting company because I've been at Red Hat about 5 years. Been following the open source space. In a lot of ways, Red Hat has been a pioneer in the open source culture and development model. It's a way to crowdsource software, essentially. So
there's no IP.
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
There's no intellectual property. You're absolutely right. What we sell are support subscriptions, right? And so it's a great way to be a trusted advisor to companies and a great way to democratize the software development process. So you and I can be contributors to code that Red Hat then takes downstream and essentially creates a model that is ready for enterprise consumption. So Red Hat certainly earned its chops as a Linux company, but gradually it has turned into a much more broader sort of an enterprise company. Everything from platform as a service with our OpenShift model, where we offer the Kubernetes platform, both for application development as well as for infrastructure, but then also extending into private cloud. As you're hearing, hybrid cloud is all the rage these days. So you can't just be private or public, you've got to be both. But then it's certainly, we take the approach of, build a platform and they will come, right? And the idea that our platforms are instrumented and integrated with middleware and storage and services and management and all of these other pieces that made them so rich for application development and infrastructure. So exciting times ahead.
I'm curious to hear from your point of view because I know you're seeing the demand from the marketing department a lot more now for the technologies. Want to talk about that?
Absolutely. I think you bring up a great point, right? One of the key sort of trends that we see in the space is that we are moving from a world where digital marketing was one aspect of marketing to a world where we are marketing in a digital world. In a sense, digital marketing has gone from a fraction to the whole, and that changes the landscape completely. The way that the CMOs interact. The way that campaigns are run, I would make the case that the old way of running campaigns is dead. I mean, you really have to be a lot more interactive, a lot more reactive to the market. There's so much happening out there, and so as a broader trend, we're seeing digital marketing as really taking over traditional marketing.
I think that is true. In the marketing world, we buy a lot more technology. And we're a lot more services like intent data and having the technology to monitor and be predictive in what we do.
Yeah, no, predictive analytics, I mean, that's huge, right? I think there's a couple of areas where I find this industry is moving so fast, it's hard to keep track sometimes. But I think what's interesting to me is can be moved from predictive to programmatic, where essentially you instill so much intelligence into the system that it's able to make decisions for itself and it's actually able to course correct and change buying decisions and media buys and syndication and things like that in an automated fashion. And how do you achieve that scale, not just for yourself, but for partners as well? The other area of predictive analytics that I find really interesting is if you think about predictive today, it's very focused on microeconomic variables. So think about sales and sometimes sentiment analysis, things like that. What I'm interested in where this is headed is macroeconomic. So, open up the newspaper, there's no dearth of geopolitical movement happening in, positive, negative, depends on, your perspective, but there's a lot of news. Weather could be a factor. So there's a lot of factors that are outside of the control of the selling motion, right, that do impact your sales at the end of the day. So can marketing tools and predictive tools incorporate some of those factors in the way that we run our marketing campaigns in the future?
Yeah, especially on the B2C consumer side.
Exactly. Right? And even on the B2B side, right? There's changes in leadership sometimes that can make that difference. There's M&A activity that happens and that changes the selling motion. You have a lot of deals in flight sometimes when we talk about account-based marketing as well. So there's a lot of different ways that macroeconomic variables can impact sales.
Yeah. So you are handling the storage side of the technology at Red Hat. And I know from the marketing activities that we do, there's a lot of data. So that's where the storage technology becomes part of the IT stack for marketing, right?
Absolutely. I mean, data is gold, right? Data is the new oil. You've heard all the adages. But I think it goes beyond the data. I think it's certainly Data is a great starting point. It gives us a lot more visibility, a lot more efficiency, a lot in terms of accountability and measurement of the success of our campaigns. But at the same time, I think it's how you use the data. And I think there's a mindset aspect to this as well. One of the things, I live in product marketing, which is interesting because it's a great cross-section of product and marketing.
Yes.
So I'm a technologist at heart and a marketer by trade, right? So it's always interesting to draw these parallels between what's happening in the technological world and what's happening in the marketing world. So one instance of that is, back to your point, is the agile development process, where we went from this sort of monolithic waterfall development model to an agile model, where you start with a prototype and you iterate often. You fail early,
yes.
You release often, and it's a continuous integration, continuous development process essentially. And that has been applied to marketing. So it's interesting we talk about data and technology, but the role of the marketer, the core understanding of an ecosystem of the environment variables, very similar to a scientist, right? It really is the scientific method in action, where as a scientist you have to understand your variables and you have to be a domain expert to make a hunch, to start with that initial hypothesis.
Yes.
And you can do that in the marketing world now. Start with an initial hypothesis and then test your way using data, right? A/B testing is nothing but using control groups,
yes.
right? So there's a lot of similarities. But you're right. I mean, technology and data is absolutely pervasive in the way that marketing is executed in the modern enterprise today.
So given that marketing has become a lot more prominent as a buyer of technology, how does your company go about building awareness and attracting those prospects?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of people talk about digital marketing as sort of being changed, and there's new trends in the marketplace. I think the one thing that has not changed is the fact that content is king. I mean, it's an old adage, but it still holds true. I think as a marketer, you have to have a keen sense that your end consumer is extremely discerning. And in fact, back to your point about data, they have access to all of this data to very rapidly compare you to your competitors.
Yeah.
So if you're not making your case a compelling case very quickly, you're going to lose the customer, right? So we think of it in terms of a customer journey, right? Or a customer experience, end to end. And that's the cool thing about marketing. It's not brochures and events and all of that. I mean, there's some aspect of that. But more and more, we're seeing marketing is that glue that is from the first touch point to the customer, is how do you source and how do you understand the impact that marketing is making to revenue. And just going back to your point about tools, right? Collaboration is a great aspect that these tools bring to the market, which is collaboration between various departments in the value chain for marketing, but also collaboration between sales and marketing, right? I would argue that in some cases, a well-executed modern marketing campaign, you can't tell where marketing ends and the sales motion starts, and that's a great place to be. So as a company, we're definitely adapting to all of these trends.
I think the product marketing's role is becoming a lot more prominent in the world of content marketing, because B2B buyers and even consumers, we research so much. That means that you have to make that content available online, educating that buyer. And who creates the content? Is the product marketing team.
Exactly. Right? It starts at the product marketing team.
Especially for complex portfolio technologies, product marketing has to be the one that creates all of that content for the different departments.
Yep. No, that's so true. And the point you made about different departments, right? I think persona marketing is such a key thing. And again, going back to content, you've got to make compelling content for that particular persona.
Yeah.
And for that, you need a really good understanding of who that persona is. And those personas are constantly evolving. One of the areas that we lay a lot of focus on also is account-based marketing. So the idea that, your classic 80-20, right? 80% of your revenue comes from approximately 20% of your customers. Right. With a startup, it may actually be even more exacerbated, where it's 95-5, right? But over time, you kind of stabilize towards an 80-20 mix. So how can we create a tailored marketing experience? And product marketing is absolutely at the center of that as well.
Because you're feeding the content to be relevant for that person,
exactly.
And at that point in the journey too.
Exactly, and that's the key point is there's a healthy balance between inundating a customer. I mean, how many times have we talked about one account being inundated and being approached by multiple salespeople, marketing offers? Yeah. Can we get to the point where, you're still going to have multiple, large international accounts are going to have multiple entries in your CRM database, and that's always going to be the case. But is there a way to consolidate and streamline that experience where you're growing champions in your key lighthouse accounts, where they're taking on your role of marketing and really growing other champions in those accounts? That's really the dream of account-based marketing.
I want to ask you what you look forward to. Given all these technologies and the cool things that you can do in marketing, product marketing, content marketing, what is it that you're excited about? You're looking forward to executing, trying out?
Yeah, I think it's what excites me the most is just the changing role of the CMO, and how CMOs approach some of these problems around. You mentioned the content, contacts is another problem, and being able to sort of streamline that customer journey. I think what excites me a lot and what gives me a lot of hope is the fact that, I mean, if you look at the resumes of the modern CMO, a majority of them are engineers. So what gives me a lot of hope is that scientific method actually being applied to marketing rather than the classic old days of, I know 50% of my marketing budget is wasted, I just don't know which 50%, right? We're moving to a much more sort of stable model where things are measured and you can get instant response. Now, I mean, the old days of, it's a 90-day sales cycle, or I'm going to do something with marketing and I'll let you know in 6 months if it worked or not. Right. Those days are gone.
Right. So they say marketing is a combination of art and science.
Yes.
And what you're saying is that with the technology, we are now being able to be a lot more scientific and less of an artist and more of a scientist.
Absolutely. That's so true. I mean, we owe it to ourselves as marketers because think about it. Let me ask you a question, actually, Jessica. The result might actually surprise you. What percentage of CEOs have a CMO background?
20%?
Right? The answer is 5%. Right? Oh. So, and actually, 20 is kind of what I thought when I first saw that question as well. But there's a lot of research that suggests that there's underrepresentation of marketing at the CEO level, which means that marketing is fundamentally not understood, right? So we owe it to ourselves to provide that credibility that marketing brings. How do we move the needle? What is marketing's impact to the P&L, right? Yeah. And data is our friend. That's how we execute. That's how we show measurement and accountability. And we show, profit generation. Marketing needs to turn from a cost center to a profit center. Right. And to be able to show that to the CEO and to the sales leaders, I think that is truly exciting as the changing role of the CMO as we look forward.
I think in particular, marketing department, the product marketing role should gain a lot more power because the product knowledge that you create is not only used for marketing. That could be used for sales enablement, and that could be used for customer support, customer success, for adoption of the product, and upsell and cross-sell as you're expanding more usage of the product. And all of that content, that knowledge is coming out of the product marketing.
Yeah, no, you're so right. But I think it's more than that, right? I think it's understanding the products, but it's also understanding your customer challenges. How do customers use your product? Because at the end of the day, customers want solutions to their problems, right? They don't necessarily invest in products. Products are one way to enable or get them towards that solution, but it's understanding your personas and your customers. And you're right, product marketing absolutely is at the center of that universe. So the story starts there, but it's important to think in terms of a customer journey and the entire customer experience.
And feeding them with the content you create past the sales cycle.
Absolutely.
Irshad, I want to ask you about this persona. Beyond the persona, is like you've got people who are generalists. They buy a variety of IT. They want it in a package solution. And then you got people who are very specialists. They want one piece of the IT stack. So how do you do product marketing when it's those type of personalities?
That's a really great question, Jessica. I think that's where the art and the science of product marketing comes into the picture. Gartner has an interesting statistic around by 2021, 40% of the IT staff will be generalists. So generalists think and they purchase in very different ways. They evaluate options in very different ways. Their purchasing criteria are primarily centered around easy management and being able to solve problems, as opposed to being, by definition, they're not specialists. And so they're not looking at head-to-head sort of data sheet wars between individual pieces of the stack.
I see.
What they're interested in is how does this entire stack perform together.
Right.
And so in terms of product marketing, it's two ways, right? One is you've got to appeal to that side of the ease of management and consumption, but also I think we owe it to ourselves to take back some of that market knowledge to the engineers and the product management teams and ensure that they're building in things like security and ease of management and consumption and as a service models and all of that as they're thinking about the product, and it's not an afterthought that's bolted on. So it's a really interesting space.
And what about millennials? Do you find it challenging either working with them or marketing to them?
How much time you have. No, but it's interesting. I see myself as kind of being in that sandwich generation where I appreciate avocado toast, but I'm conflicted about it. So, I think at the end of the day, it's about empathy, right? You asked the question really well, which is millennials are, consumers, but they're also employees, right? And so I think as long as you're able to, as a marketer, I think we owe it to ourselves to offer that empathy to whoever the persona is, right? Millennials, by definition, there's a lot more technology, a lot more social aspects to it. Devices are huge. I have a daughter going into kindergarten next year, and when we did the tour of the classroom, they were already talking about iPads and touchscreen displays and things like that in kindergarten. So in 20 years' time, these are going to be the consumers that we're going to be marketing to. So you have to factor that in, just the way that they consume content. Again, the content remains king, but it's about the delivery and the journey of the customer. As employees, of course, again, I think it's about empathy, right? Understanding that offering, using the agile model actually is a great place to start. Offering lots of feedback, sometimes sandwich, two good pieces of feedback around one bad piece of feedback, but it's about helping them grow and helping them really set themselves up for success. And the way that they think about their careers might be vastly different from how past generations might have. But that's where the empathy comes in, to understand where they're coming from and how they see growth for themselves in their careers. So I think it's very exciting times.
Okay, it is exciting time. And I know that you were at IBM for 10 years, and you've been at Red Hat, but you might be back at IBM soon then.
That's right. So last fall, IBM announced the intent to acquire Red Hat. And looking forward, it hasn't officially closed yet, but looking forward, I think there's some great synergies where Red Hat brings a breadth of knowledge and understanding of the hybrid cloud environment, and also just the brand equity in the both with the business as well as technology decision makers. And IBM, of course, brings a lot of the scale and the breadth worldwide. So I'm very excited about the future.
Okay, well. Once that happens, we have to have another conversation.
Sounds great.
With you being the IBM guy. Okay.
Thanks, Jessica.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Irshad.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks for watching. Take It Up with Jessica Lee.